The news is good, and the race is on. We'll tell you exactly what it will now take to get this potential superstar in the draft. Plus, speaking of superstars, wait until you hear what one legend has to say about this one and what it means for him in the next few weeks. Plus, off an easy night at the office, do the Lakers and LeBron face a decision he absolutely does not want to make? We'll answer those questions and plenty more as we get up with you, starting right now. Live and delighted to welcome Jeff Darlington back. It's been a long time since we've seen this one here. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Appreciate that.
Bunch to get into there. And, oh, by the way, one of our major sports has decided to completely rip up the way it conducts its season and start all over again. We'll get to Buster on that. But first, Jeff, let's start with you. Let's run the hurry up and go through some of the big quarterback questions around the sport of football. Where are we on Dak Prescott?
It's not going great, Greeny. It feels almost as if Dak Prescott wants to be a free agent at this point, which sounds unfathomable to a lot of people. But right now, we're talking about if they don't get their offer up to Russell Wilson money and not a penny less, I don't see this happening before the deadline. Of course, things certainly change fast, but right now, it does not feel like all love between Dak and the Cowboys.
And that brings us to Tom Brady. Where do we stand as far as he's concerned?
Well, I heard what you said yesterday, Greeny, about the fact that Tom Brady thinks that he knows where he's going, and I have to say I don't agree at this point. In fact, I know that he doesn't. The question becomes, what is this free agency tour going to look like? I can tell you this much. He does not expect it to be a Peyton Manning-like thing where he's running out in helicopters, kissing babies and trying to figure out exactly where he belongs. I think this will be quick and concise, but I will say it's not done yet.
All right, and that brings us to a future star, at least we all hope, and that's Tua Tagovailoa. Where are we there?
Well, we're getting very good reports on where his hip stands right now, but that not necessarily coming from teams. The medicals from teams is what's going to matter most here, and I think that once we get those, we'll know exactly where he stands. But we really should watch that Detroit pick at number 3 overall. That where a lot of people think potentially Tua could land. We're going to hear ad nauseum that Detroit pick is for sale because a lot of people are going to try to say that is where he'll go.
Yeah, there's a lot of draft consequence in that as well, which I want to get to in a minute. But let's start with our resident Tua correspondent here, and that, of course, is Laura Rutledge. What can you fill us in on as far as the medical tests we got back yesterday?
Yeah, he's doing really well, and the fracture fully healed, which I think is the really important part with this hip injury. You wanted to see that just really be structurally where they want it to be for the further health of Tua. And you know, to go back to what's consistently been said by the doctors who are very close to this, he's been ahead of schedule through all of this, and also is in a scenario where he's doing fantastic. I mean, those words have been used. So now we're at the point where he can start doing more athletic-based rehab instead of just the general rehab for this hip. It's a huge step in the right direction for Tua.
Bobby, we all understand that what this is ultimately going to come down to is someone being willing to risk their job on his health. If you were doing it, I'm making you the general manager of an NFL team. Are you willing to trade up to 3, which Darlington and everyone is going to tell you you're going to need to do to get him, to trade draft capital to move up to take that guy with his history?
He's got tremendous upside, and everybody looks at this, and before this season, he was supposed to be the guy. I cannot get over, though, the fact that he has had 2 ankle surgeries and a hip surgery. And you know what? None of these things really seem to be related, Greeny. So I'm not saying, you know what, that he's going to have another issue with his ankle or his hip's going to give him a problem. It may be something completely unrelated, and that is the biggest problem to me. He's immensely talented. I think he has a bigger upside with Joe Burrow, but I'm just worried, will we ever get to see the peak of that upside given his injury history?
I am very interested to see what the Chargers do if they're willing to go from 6 to 3 to go get Tua. All I keep hearing about is the reason that Phillip Rivers is no longer with the Chargers is because Anthony Lynn wants a guy with escapability. He wants mobility. He wants everything that Tua is. This feels like the spot. If the Chargers can go from 6 to 3, that's what we should be watching as the draft gets closer.
And, Bobby, I think it's important when you look at his injury history, all those injuries have happened because he wouldn't throw the ball away. He was trying to scramble around, make a play. One of the things that he said to me when I spoke to him recently is that's something he's going to work on. Now, we're going to have to see it in action, and that's something that I imagine when he's talking to these teams, they're going to want to be assured of that. Also, the main thing that these doctors are going to be looking at from the NFL standpoint is could he re-injure that hip in the same way? That was an injury that happens in car accidents. It was a fluky thing that doesn't usually even happen in football.
Everybody loves extending the play. They love the quarterback running around, and on third down, you buy some time, Greeny, you pick up that third and 8. The problem is you take a ton of shots. We saw Pat Mahomes, who did it as well as anybody. He missed time this year when he tweaked his knee.
All right, I want to ask you a few other questions about the draft because clearly the pressure point becomes 3, which begs to me the question, does someone decide to jump all the way up to 2, and is there any way Washington could be talked out of moving or talked into moving out of that spot where Chase Young sits? We will get to that as the morning continues, but first, Tom Brady.
Yeah, why not? Tom Brady, he's doing something he hasn't done before, exploring the possibility of leaving the New England Patriots. Recently, TMZ asked Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre about how good Brady is entering his 21st season. Here's what Favre said. Quote, I hear a lot of so-called experts say his age is catching up with him. I don't see that. I see a quarterback still doing what he does, but the cast around him was not up to par. I think his game is as good as it's ever been. So while Favre may not see regression in Tom Brady's game, last season's numbers paint a slightly different picture. His 53.7 total QBR was his worst in a season since the metric began in 2006. And at 42 years of age, his status as a top-tier signal caller is certainly up in the air. And Bobby, you could blame that on those weapons or lack thereof around him. But do you think that Brady's still performing at the same elite level?
Maybe not quite at the same level, but I believe it's been a very small drop-off over the last 4 or 5 years. He did not have somebody that could consistently win in one-on-one coverage, and they didn't have anyone else that could garner double coverage. And so because of that, there was really nowhere to go with the football. They had offensive line issues, and I don't think I'm breaking news here. Tom Brady, not the most mobile guy in the world, so
right.
You get him off his spot, you get him moving. I think that caused some of the inaccuracies. You were looking at some of the drops, and it's just a situation here where, you know what, maybe he's not quite as good, but the numbers don't tell the whole story. He is not an average quarterback. I think 22nd in the QBR in the league. That is not him by any stretch.
Listen, I'll take it a step farther. If we lived in a parallel, well, it wouldn't be a perpendicular universe, whatever universe it would be, in which Antonio Brown played the entire season for New England, are you willing to bet they wouldn't have been in the Super Bowl this year? Because I'm not.
They almost beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They were a couple of 50-50 calls, some replays away from beating a team that won the Super Bowl. So listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that if he didn't have Antonio Brown, he wouldn't have been at that elite level once again.
Take it a step further. Not only that, Josh Gordon, Demaryius Thomas, Gronk, they never replaced the tight end. If you look at the first 2-3 weeks of the season, to your point, nobody was saying Tom Brady has fallen off. We were talking about the potential of a historic season for Tom Brady.
When they got Mohamed Sanu, we were talking about whether they would go 16-0 or not.
Right, and then he got hurt,
Yeah.
and he hurt his ankle, and it didn't work out. The one thing I'd also point out is when you look at the internal criticism of Tom Brady, if you hear what they say privately, it's about the fact that this season he was too risk-adverse. He was too afraid necessarily to throw a pass that might get picked off. That's not talking about age. That's not talking about arm.
But who is the they? I know you can't say that, but my point is, the they need to shut up.
Right.
Because
I agree.
The God's honest truth of it is, they depended more. Every other team that has ever won with a quarterback of his age has done it by helping him, by carrying him. They depended more on him this year than they ever have before. And some of the draft picks are just terrible. They took N'Keal Harry ahead of all of these superstar receivers. You put Deebo Samuel or one of those guys on this team, it would have looked totally different.
And look, I obviously see where people on this table stand when it comes to this, but when we look at what Tom Brady did 2 years ago, when they were also saying that he wasn't a top 10 quarterback anymore, they know who I'm talking about. That's a situation where Tom Brady proved them wrong, and I believe that he is capable of doing it again.
And you mentioned the throwaways and how that became the issue. Like, if the biggest problem you have with your quarterback is he's not aggressive enough to push the ball in there, go down to Tampa Bay. Talk to Jameis Winston. He'll be the guy, Greeny. He'll throw it into anywhere. He might throw 30 touchdowns, but he's going to give you 30 interceptions. They had the best defense in the NFL, or one of them. Tom Brady was playing it to exactly what they had to do.
Are they suggesting he should be throwing 50-50 balls to guys who don't catch the ball when they're wide open?
Well, here's the thing, Greeny. I think this is the reason that we're having the conversation about Tom Brady potentially leaving the Patriots. It does not feel like both of them are aligned in terms of what they can still do.
Well, I tell you, I think that's fascinating to me. And then one of the possibilities that seem to come up in this, and I'm not sure where, but we have you here, so let's do it. One of the possibilities that seems to have arisen as Brady goes out there and tries to figure out what the next step is going to be. We hear about the Chargers because there's an obvious reason why they might be interested. We hear about the Raiders and a few other places. Where did the Cowboys come into all this? Michael Irvin all of a sudden is talking about the Cowboys, and that sort of set Twitter on fire for a little while.
Well, I think when we look at, I think we should maybe, I don't want to say dismiss because I have the utmost respect for Michael Irvin, but I don't think that that's necessarily coming from the Cowboys organization in terms of their interest in Tom Brady. At this point, though, if we do look at Dak Prescott's situation, he should be careful because this leverage might have just fallen in the lap of the Cowboys. All of a sudden, they can say, hey, maybe we do go get Tom Brady. We have him for 2 years. If we're going to pay top dollar for a quarterback, why don't we get the guy that we know can win a Super Bowl as opposed to a guy who's gotten us, into the playoffs but not beyond?
Let's ask the question this way to everyone at the table. If your sole goal, if you're Jerry Jones, is to win the Super Bowl next year,
yes.
I mean, with this one coming season, and you're not concerned about anything else, do you have a better chance doing it with Dak Prescott or Tom Brady?
I'm going to go with the guy who has the proven postseason track record in Tom Brady. The guy's been to 9 Super Bowls. He's won 6 of them. Dallas hasn't done anything. And, Lord, I know you make the face because it doesn't feel good. But we're talking about one-off. And Jerry Jones, it's what's the Super Bowl going to look like next year?
Yeah.
The long-term play, obviously, is Dak Prescott. And if I'm Michael Irvin here, I'm going to set down my vodka cranberry and have a little conversation, try to figure this thing out. But I think in a one-year isolation, you could look at Tom Brady. I mean, you can even make the argument like they're going to throw out guys potentially like a Phillip Rivers or someone like that, a veteran guy who maybe has a little more experience. And I know that it doesn't feel good, but that's what Dallas is going to use to lever up on this.
Dak Prescott is the heartbeat of that clubhouse. I mean, locker room.
Yeah.
He is the guy that everybody rallies around. Like, they can't get rid of Dak Prescott. But here's my question to you. Is Dak Prescott, maybe interested in being a free agent here? I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but
it certainly feels like it. Yeah. And for the conversations that I've had, he is